Prometheus by Lord Byron. Structure, summary, analysis. Hello and welcome to the Discourse. Lord Byron's Prometheus is a dramatic monologue that addresses the mythical titan who defied Zeus to bring fire and knowledge to humanity. The poem celebrates Prometheus as a symbol of defiant resilience and silent suffering in the face of oppressive power. Lord Byron stands as a central figure of the Romantic movement, renowned for his emphasis on intense emotion, individualism, and the rebellious spirit. His own persona as a brooding, heroic outsider is perfectly embodied in the concept of the Byronic hero, an archetype mirrored in his portrayal of Prometheus. Structure and form. Byron's Prometheus is structured as a single, powerful address in 3 stanzas of unequal length. The poem's form is an ode, a formal, often celebratory address to a specific subject. While it has a strong rhythmic quality, it does not follow a single, strict metrical pattern. The meter is predominantly iambic tetrameter, 4 iambs per line, though this is frequently varied for emphasis. There is no consistent rhyming scheme across the entire poem. Instead, Byron employs complex and shifting rhyme patterns, example ABBA, AABB, and internal rhymes within and between the stanzas. This controlled irregularity gives the poem a feeling of impassioned, organic speech rather than a tightly constrained form, mirroring its themes of rebellion. The speaker or narrator of the poem is a first-person voice that passionately identifies with Prometheus. This speaker directly addresses the Titan and through this address merges Byron's own perspective and admiration with the mythical figure, making the poem feel deeply personal. Literary and historical context. The literary and historical context of Byron's Prometheus is deeply rooted in the Romantic era's profound fascination with the Titan as a symbol of rebellion, creativity, and the human spirit. During this period, Prometheus became a versatile archetype through which writers explored themes of individual defiance against tyranny, the perils of unchecked ambition, and the nature of creation itself. Byron's poem, written in 1816, emerged from a specific historical moment of political disillusionment following the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, when hope for liberty in Europe were being suppressed by restored monarchies. For Byron and his contemporaries, Prometheus offered a potent symbol and a sign of resilient opposition. This myth was not exclusive to Byron, it sparked a rich dialogue among the Romantics. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Byron's friend and fellow poet, authored Prometheus Unbound in 1820, a lyrical drama that reimagines the Titan's story as one of spiritual victory through forgiveness and love, ultimately leading to the liberation of humanity. In a different literary genre, Mary Shelley, who was part of the same intellectual circle, titled her groundbreaking Gothic novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus in 1818. Her work transposed the myth into a scientific context, warning of the dangers when human creators, like the Titan, overreach without ethical responsibility. This collective engagement with the myth extended beyond England. The German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe had written his defiant poem Prometheus decades earlier in 1774, which is a key work of the Saturn and Drang movement that portrayed the Titan as a scornful creator who rejects divine authority. Thus, Byron's poem is a central piece in a wider romantic conversation, using the ancient myth to articulate a modern, revolutionary ethos centered on the power of the individual will. Summary and analysis. Stanza 1, lines 1 to 14. Titan, to whose immortal eyes the sufferings of mortality, seen in their sad reality, were not as things that gods despise, what was thy pity's recompense? A silent suffering and intense. The rock, the vulture, and the chain, all that the proud can feel of pain. The agony they do not show, the suffocating sense of woe, which speaks but in its loneliness, and then is jealous lest the sky should have a listener nor will sigh, until its voice is echoless. This opening stanza from Lord Byron's Prometheus directly addresses the Titan, summarizing his eternal punishment for the crime of pitying humanity. The speaker reminds Prometheus that his immortal gaze saw the true sorrow of mortal life, which gods typically ignore. For this act of compassion, his reward was not glory but immense silent agony, chained to a rock, tortured by a vulture, and enduring a profound pain that is both solitary and inexpressible. The analysis reveals Byron's use of powerful literary devices to establish the poem's core themes. The stanza begins with an apostrophe, Titan, creating a solemn direct address. Vivid visual imagery, the rock, the vulture, and the chain, concretely symbolizes eternal physical and mental torment. The theme of silent suffering is amplified through personification. The speaker describes a woe so private it is jealous lest the sky should have a listener, suggesting that even the cosmos is seen as a potential witness to his humiliation. This establishes the central conflict between defiant, suffering nobility and unjust, oppressive power. The tone is one of profound admiration and indignation, honoring Prometheus for enduring a pain so deep it must be borne in absolute, echoless solitude. Stanza 2, lines 15 to 34. Titan, to thee the strife was given between the suffering and the will, which torture where they cannot kill, and the inexorable heaven and the deep tyranny of fate, the ruling principle of hate, which for its pleasure doth create the things it may annihilate. Refused thee even the boon to die, the wretched gift, eternity, was thine, and thou hast borne it well. All that the thunder wrung from thee was but the menace which flung back on him the torments of thy wrath, the fate thou didst so well foresee, but would not to appease him tell. And in thy silence was his sentence, and in his soul a vain repentance, and evil, dread so ill dissembled, that in his hand the lightnings trembled. This second stanza of Lord Byron's Prometheus analyzes the nature of the Titan's conflict and reveals its surprising outcome. It summarizes that Prometheus's core struggle was an internal strife between his immense suffering and his unconquerable will. His punishment from a vengeful heaven governed by hate was deliberately designed to be unending. He was denied even the boon to die, forced to bear the wretched gift, eternity. However, the stanza concludes by shifting focus to Zeus, the thunderer, arguing that Prometheus's silent endurance has become a weapon. By foreseeing fate but refusing to reveal it, Prometheus's silence becomes a sentence that instills in his oppressor vain repentance, and a dread so profound it makes the gods' own lightnings tremble. The analysis of this passage centers on the moral and psychological victory of the oppressed over the oppressor. Byron employs potent personification, portraying heaven, fate, and hate as active, malicious rulers. This establishes the cosmic scale of the tyranny Prometheus resists. A central paradox is introduced. Immortality, often a divine gift, is here a wretched curse, a key element of the torture. The stanza's power builds to a profound irony. The tools of Zeus's power, the foreknowledge Prometheus withholds, and the silent agony he bears, are transformed into the instruments of the god's own psychological defeat. The final imagery of the trembling lightnings is a masterful symbol, demonstrating that true authority has shifted from physical power to steadfast will. The overarching theme is the triumph of the defiant will and silent resistance, showing how unyielding endurance can invert the very relationship between master and slave. Stanza 3, lines 35 to 59. Thy godlike crime was to be kind, to render with thy precepts less the sum of human wretchedness, and strengthen man with his own mind, but baffled as thou wert from high. Still in thy patient energy, in the endurance and repulse of thine impenetrable spirit, which earth and heaven could not convulse, a mighty lesson we inherit. Thou art a symbol and a sign to mortals of their fate and force. Like thee, man is in part divine, a troubled stream from a pure source, and man in portions can foresee his own funeral destiny, his wretchedness and his resistance, and his sad unallied existence, to which his spirit may oppose itself and equal to all woes, and a firm will and a deep sense, which even in torture can descry its own concentered recompense, triumphant where it dares defy, and making death a victory. This final stanza of Lord Byron's Prometheus transforms the Titan's punishment into a universal lesson for humanity. The summary reveals that Prometheus's godlike crime was merely an act of divine kindness, using his knowledge to lessen human misery and strengthen our own minds. Though defeated, his patient energy and impenetrable spirit provide a mighty lesson. He becomes a symbol and a sign, a model demonstrating that humans, like thee, are also partly divine, a troubled stream from a pure source. The stanza concludes that while humans can foresee their own suffering and sad annihilate existence, they too can oppose their fate with a firm will, transforming agony into an eternal victory and making death a victory. The analysis focuses on the stanza's culmination of the poem's central themes, the triumph of the human will and the nobility of compassionate rebellion. Byron employs a powerful paradox from the first line, calling compassion a godlike crime, which immediately reframes the myth from a story of transgression to one of moral virtue. The Titan is elevated through metaphor into a symbol and a sign, an eternal emblem for mankind. The key metaphor of humanity as a troubled stream from a pure source encapsulates the romantic belief in an innate divine spirit within people, even if it is clouded by life's suffering. The tone shifts decisively from one of agonized description to one of declarative inspiration, arguing that the real recompense is not freedom from pain but the internal victory gained by defiantly enduring it. The final resounding image of making death a victory serves as the ultimate statement of this philosophy, suggesting that unyielding spirit can conquer even the greatest earthly powers. Conclusion. In his powerful poem Prometheus, Lord Byron masterfully transforms an ancient myth into a timeless manifesto for the human spirit in its struggle against oppression. The poem concludes by asserting that true victory lies not in the overthrow of a tyrant through force, but in the unyielding moral and psychological resilience of the oppressed. Byron's Prometheus emerges not as a defeated victim, but as the ultimate Byronic hero whose internal fortitude turns endless torture into a profound triumph over his oppressor. The poem's central symbols articulate this philosophy of resistance. The rock, the vulture, and the chain are symbols of tangible physical tyranny, the brutal instruments used to crush spirit through pain. More powerful, however, are the symbols of defiance. Prometheus' silence and his unyielding will, his refusal to speak or submit, becomes a weapon more devastating than any lightning bolt, sentencing Zeus to a prison of his own fear and insecurity. Finally, the fire he gifted humanity, though not explicitly named in Byron's text, is the undeniable subtext of his godlike crime. It symbolizes enlightenment, knowledge, and the spark of revolutionary consciousness that empowers humanity to challenge its own chains. Byron directly connects this mythical struggle to the theme of revolution against tyranny. Written in an era of political reaction, the poem argues that the first revolution must be internal. Prometheus provides the model. By confronting the defied tyranny of fate with a firm will, he demonstrates that endurance itself is a form of rebellion. His victory is not one of power but of principle, teaching humanity that to endure with dignity is to defy a tyrant's core purpose. The poem extends this lesson to all of humanity, a troubled stream from a pure source, arguing that our divine spark is our capacity for defiant resistance. Thus, the revolution Byron champions is as much intellectual and spiritual as it is political. It is the revolution of an unconquered mind which can make death a victory, by forever refusing to grant the oppressor the satisfaction of surrender. In essence, Prometheus moves beyond a simple allegory for political revolt to propose a deeper, more enduring philosophy that, in the relentless conflict between suffering and will, the steadfast human spirit possesses the ultimate power to define the meaning of its own struggle and thereby achieve a form of transcendent victory. So this is it for today. We will continue to discuss the history of English literature. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.